Hey guys, Brad here from Scooter Street. Today we're talking about probably the single most crucial part of scooter tuning or two-stroke engine building in general, and probably one of the things that gets overlooked and not spoken about the most. And that would be matching your cylinder kit with your exhaust properly. Now this is an issue that we very commonly have customers asking us questions because they've run into and not understanding how it is they're supposed to fix this. To be clear, if your exhaust and your cylinder are not matched properly, it is impossible to tune your way out of this. You have a core problem with the bike, and until you fix it, you cannot tune the bike properly. I cannot overstate how important it is to get your cylinder kit and your exhaust matched properly before you look at anything else on the bike. Now, as it so happens, I actually have an excellent example of this right behind me. Now, if you've been following along for a little while, you know that we kind of have two parallel builds happening at the same time. This is our shop zip, our little black zip just behind me, just here. This one's sort of aimed at being like a high-end street build. So this bike has an MHR replica cylinder kit and a 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐤 on it, which are a match made in heaven. Probably my favorite street setup, really on any scooter. These two go together so well, they are so well matched, they're easy to tune, so torquey, a lot of fun. Then we have my bike behind me here, which has an MHR racing cylinder kit, which is sort of the lowest single ring Bridgeport cylinder kit that Malossi make for the Piaggio engine. But that being said, it is still a race port map, so it has a big Bridgeport inside the cylinder kit. It's set up for really high compression, so it's running 0.6 mil squish, which means that the piston comes within 0.6 mil of the head. Very, very high compression. The other thing about the cylinder kit is to make that high power, it's set up for very, very high RPM. So this cylinder kit doesn't really start to make power until it's up at 10, 11,000 RPM, compared to say a more conventional port map like is in our street scooter, which is sort of around 6 to 7,000 RPM, you know, peaking out around 8. It makes its base, its most power. So let me come to the issue with my bike. Now, recently we did the inrotor install on the bike, which again, going with the racing cylinder kit, the inrotor allows it to rev up to those high RPMs very quickly, so you can get good takeoff, rather than it sort of bogging down for a little bit until it's revved up. But now we've run into sort of the bigger major issue with my bike, and that is that it has or had a Stage 6 Mark II exhaust on it, which is sort of a mid to high level street exhaust. It's actually a lower performing exhaust than the 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐤 that's on our street build, matched with this MHR racing cylinder kit, which is a high revving, high performing kit. You can start to see maybe there's going to be a bit of an issue here, and there very much is. This Stage 6 exhaust is a huge bottleneck on this MHR racing cylinder kit. So much so that when I put the inrotor in it, I took it for a nip around the block and it was a lot better. And then just as a comparison point out of curiosity, I then took our little black shop street build around the block and it was way faster, which was very frustrating that a street build is significantly faster with a lot more torque and a lot more pulling power than my race build. And it just goes to show as such a great example why you can have all the best parts. You know, this bike has an inrotor in it, has a 21 mil carb with a pod filter, has an overrange transmission, it has all the right parts on it, but because it has the wrong exhaust, it completely ruins the tune and makes it slower than a mid to high end street build with way more expensive parts on it. So today we're going to be addressing this issue on my bike. I actually have a Penasco race exhaust that I happen to have laying around. I was going to put a Iossoni C16 on this, but I already had this exhaust laying around. So I've chucked that one on there. I'm going to pull this Penasco exhaust off. I'm going to compare it with the Stage 6 exhaust, just so you guys can get a bit more of a sense of what the difference is between a street exhaust and a race exhaust, why this matters. And then I'm going to put the Penasco exhaust back on my bike and we're going to retune it to suit the larger exhaust, because obviously the fuel demand is going to be much higher now. And because it's revving higher, we're going to need to make some adjustments to the transmission tune as well. It's going to need some lighter rollers, because now it's actually able to rev up, which it wasn't before, being bottlenecked by this Stage 6 exhaust. This might seem like a bit more of a boring video. However, I just cannot stress enough how important it is to get your cylinder and your exhaust matched properly. You can't tune your way out of it. It has to be right. And I really feel like this is going to be such a good example, because at the very end, Adam's going to jump on our street zip. I'm going to jump on mine. We're going to have a little drag race just in the car park here, and we're going to sort of see what the difference is once my bike has its proper power unleashed with this Penasco race exhaust and tuned correctly for it. Going to see what it's like compared to our street zip. And yeah, unfortunately I didn't get a before video of what the performance is like between them, but I can very much promise you our street zip was significantly faster than my zip. So it'll be certainly interesting, and I think it will demonstrate the point really well at the end, drag racing the two. I suspect, I'm quite certain that mine's going to be quite a lot faster than our street zip. Alrighty, so we have our two exhausts here, obviously our stage 6 at the top and our Penasco Racing at the bottom. Now, when it comes to two-stroke exhaust tuning, you can really get into the weeds and get really technical, but we don't need to do that today because we're just trying to understand the difference between, when I say a low performance and a high performance exhaust, probably a better way to phrase that is a low revving performance exhaust and a high revving performance exhaust. So sort of the two most instantly noticeable distinguishing factors between these two are header diameter and header length. So, so we can have a better look at what's going on here. I've set these two up so the ends of them are parallel to each other, so we can sort of compare the headers to each other, apples for apples. So a couple of things you're going to notice straight away. The header on the Penasco is significantly shorter than the header on the Stage 6. It's actually accentuated by the fact that the Stage 6 sort of comes up a bit more than the Penasco. The Penasco just comes sort of straight around, whereas the Stage 6 comes up significantly more, so it makes the header even longer than it sort of looks from that top angle. But yes, the header length on the Penasco is significantly shorter than the Stage 6. The other thing you might notice is the diameter of the header on the Penasco is significantly bigger. Might not look like that much in the picture, but they're small diameter. So the Stage 6 I measured, it's actually 28 mil, whereas the Penasco is 35 mil. You might think to yourself, it's only 7 mil, that's not that much. But when we're talking about small numbers like this, that 7 mil is actually a 25% difference. The Penasco is 25% larger in the header diameter than the Stage 6. So that is a pretty significant difference. Now, to understand how or why this makes a difference, we need to get a little bit into the basics of how a two-stroke extraction pipe works. In as basic a sense as I can explain. So have our piston, the cylinder's up here, have a piston with fresh fuel and air, comes up, compresses, spark, bang, ignition, right? So we have a pulse of exhaust gas that works its way into the header of the exhaust. So this pulse of gas comes through, up through these expanded shapes through the extraction, right? Then it comes down to these restrictive cones, right? At the rear, comes down here. Now this restriction causes a pulse reversal. So the pulse comes down here and it sort of hits almost like a wall and it bounces back up through the exhaust, works its way all the way back up here. Now by the time that it's done this, the piston's on its way back up. It's got fresh air and fuel in the cylinder. It's coming back up to compress it. So that pulse of gas actually forces additional gas or air that's in the header of the exhaust back up into the cylinder, giving it almost like a little boost, sort of in a similar way to sort of how a turbo or a supercharger works. It's sort of like forced induction, but it's not induction. It's like forced compression, really. Now, because it's a two-stroke, as the exhaust is making its way out after the piston, piston's bang, right? Piston's coming down. We have fresh air and fuel coming into our intake ports at the same time that we have this flow or pulse of exhaust gas working its way into the exhaust. Now, this naturally causes some of that fresh air and fuel to be drawn through into the header of the exhaust with or behind the exhaust gas. So as this pulse works its way back up, we're having the top of the header fresh fuel and air just sort of it's been dragged out with the pulse of exhaust gas. So this exhaust gas essentially rams that fresh air and fuel back into the cylinder at the last possible second, right as the piston's coming up and about to close off the exhaust port. Now, obviously, more air, more fuel equals bigger bang, equals more power. So this is essentially how an extraction pipe works. It uses the exhaust pulse to force more air and fuel into the cylinder, making a bigger bang, making more power. Now, when we come to header lengths and header diameters, the longer the header is, the longer it takes that pulse to reflect and come back. Now, that longer time is more suited to a lower revving cylinder. So when a cylinder is at lower revs, obviously the piston's traveling slower, right? That pulse of exhaust gas doesn't really change. You know, it is what it is. Doesn't matter what RPM you're doing, the pulse is going to be sort of roughly the same speed. So if our piston is going slower and we have a longer header, that means, or longer extraction exhaust, that means that the maximum extraction sort of pulse boost effect, or whatever you want to call it, is going to be on a longer exhaust, more suited to lower RPMs, because it takes more time for this to come back. And when the piston's traveling slower, it means that the port timing of the cylinder and the pulse timing of the exhaust is going to be well suited to each other. You hear people saying, oh, it came on the pipe with a two-stroke, oh, it's come on the pipe. This is what they're talking about. It's where the timing of the cylinder, or the port timing of the cylinder, and the pulse timing of the exhaust have matched up, and you get this massive sudden increase in power. That's exactly what they're talking about. The port timing of the cylinder and the pulse timing of the exhaust have matched up, and you get a big boost in power. Now, when we come to the Penasco, because the header length is significantly shorter, it means that that pulse reflects back much, much faster. Now, because it's coming back faster, it means that it's more suited to higher RPMs where the piston is coming back a lot faster. So it means that that pulse will come back right at the correct moment for a cylinder with port timing suited to higher RPM. I hope that makes sense. That's the most basic way that I think I can explain it. But essentially, low revs, or a low revving cylinder, you want a slower pulse, right? So it suits the cylinder. And a higher revving cylinder, you want a shorter header. So the pulse comes back much faster, so it's more suited to a scooter or a cylinder kit that's doing higher RPMs. It's really about what the port timing of the cylinder wants. So for a low revving cylinder, you want it to give it that boost at that low mid-range sort of RPM. And obviously vice versa, for a high revving cylinder, you want the exhaust to give the cylinder that boost of power that it wants right at the RPM that the cylinder is set up to make power. Now, in this particular instance with my scooter, with the Stage 6 exhaust, what's happening is as the cylinder wants to come on and make its power, the pulse is missing the piston, in the sense that piston comes down, right? We're getting to that higher RPM where the cylinder's like, yep, cool, I'm happy, I'm just about to start making power, I'm getting into my zone, right? What happens is the pulse is coming back up, and the piston has closed off the exhaust port before the pulse makes its way back to the cylinder. The exhaust has missed the piston, essentially. That pulse has missed the port timing of the cylinder. This is where putting this Penasco or another similar race exhaust on the bike is going to make a really significant difference, because in being able to give the cylinder that boost pulse where it wants it, it's going to allow the cylinder to make significantly more power, allowing it to rev up to even higher RPMs, where then it can get even more pulse effect and make even more power, right up to where the cylinder starts to sort of top out on its maximum power. Now, when it comes to the header diameter, obviously a larger diameter means it can support more flow. So particularly at high RPMs, a larger header diameter will provide less back pressure, which essentially allows for more flow out of the exhaust port. So with like a higher end kit with a Bridgeport exhaust port in the cylinder, it's a much larger exhaust port. So a lot more exhaust gas is going to be, trying to exhaust out of the engine. So a larger header supports this. It does some other things as well, but we're going to get way too into the weeds on how performance exhausts work. Again, you can really get super in depth with the technicalities of how these work, but that's kind of all we need to understand for now. By the way, just in case you've heard the term before and you were curious, didn't know what it meant, if you've heard the term scavenging before, that is the correct term for the process of that pressure wave forcing some of the fresh air and fuel that's worked its way into the header back into the cylinder, because we're scavenging what would be wasted fresh fuel and air back into the cylinder to get the biggest bang, the biggest power. All right, so all back in, I've gone up in the manger a little bit and down in the rollers, which I think is probably going to be pretty close. I've gone up a little bit in the pilot as well. I'm just guessing. So let's see what difference we see, hey? It sounds like it's hitting a limiter. Hang on, I'll go get the screwdriver, have a look at the... See ya. I've not really ridden at tons since I put the interrotor in, so yeah, maybe the limiter's on. I'll just check it. I think it's F. F is no limit. Ah. It's on 0. I think that was like the lowest limit level. I think E is the highest, so it'd be like 14.5 or something. That should be right. We'd go no limit, but I don't really want it exploding itself. You know, it's interesting, is I've ridden it a few times with the other exhaust and I've never hit the limiter. So this goes to show it was so restrictive on the old exhaust, it just wasn't able to even get close to the limit. And now it's hitting it basically straight away. Oh, she's a lot more pokey. Yeah, that's a lot faster. That's ridiculous. Wow, that is... Jesus. It's just gone from being pretty fun to being an absolute animal. It's so hard to keep the front wheel down. I'm leaning over it, I can still feel it lifting. All right, go up and have a little drag race, see who's faster now. Try not to fall off. Back from here. All right, you ready? I'll let you say go. A full scooter distance, should I go again?
Yeah, so this, if that's got the overrange kit.
Yeah, well this bike's got a full overrange kit, I've just got the Variator, so that's a big difference right there. Alright, I'll count this time. 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Okay, so pretty dramatic difference. We've gone from being slower than our little shop scooter to being pretty significantly faster. Now, it probably only looks in the video like I'm a couple of bike lengths in front of Adam on our shop zip, but remember, it's kind of a bit of camera trickery. That's like a 25-meter drag race. I paced it out. It's 25 meters and I'm like 2 scooter lengths ahead. So that's pretty significant. If we had like a 100-meter drag strip, I would be like 20 meters in front of him by the end. So that's a pretty big difference. We've gone from slower to way faster by changing nothing but the exhaust. Now add to that a couple extra things, which is the jet in this, I've gone up a couple of points, but I've just purely guessed it. When we got back from those couple little drags, I pulled the plug out and honestly, it's a bit lean. It's looking a bit white on the plug. So the tuning of this is definitely not right yet. It still needs some more fine tuning. Whereas the tune on our little shop zip is fine-tuned to a perfect degree. It is running perfectly. I've just completely guessed this. The other thing is as well, this bike just has an MHR Variator in the front. It still has the stock pulley, stock belt. It even actually has a stock clutch just with some stiffer springs. Compare that to our shop zip, which has a full MHR overrange transmission with a Polini G3 clutch. It's all tuned out to the max. So the transmission is tuned perfectly, which I think it's probably why in that first little drag that we did, Adam got away from me a little bit at the start because the initial acceleration of the shop zip because the transmission's tuned basically perfectly, it just pulls away so quickly. Whereas this bike behind me is still pretty rough. It needs a bit more work. And honestly, that MHR overrange transmission with the rear pulley gives you additional lower gearing, which especially on a bike like this that needs to rev up really high to take off, makes a dramatic difference. So I think if we were gonna compare apples for apples and be really fair, I would finish tuning the Jet in this. I'd put a full overrange transmission in it, which I'm going to eventually do. And I'd probably put a proper clutch in it as well with a later engagement. And I think the difference between the two would be probably double again, and actually two properly tuned scooters racing each other rather than mine, which is still only 3/4 finished compared to a completely finished, beautifully tuned build, which is our 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐤. So adding those in, honestly, it's a bit even more impressive that on that second go, I still ended up a couple of bike lengths in front of the 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐤. Honestly, you know, comparing different exhausts, the C16 would be definitely a better match for this cylinder and higher performing even again. So, you know, this bike still has so much more potential, but just chucking on this spare exhaust that I had laying around has, yeah, made massive, massive difference. The point here is, again, driving at home, whichever cylinder kit you decide to buy the exhaust that suits that cylinder kit, and your life will be so much easier tuning your scooter and getting the best performance out of it. Anyway, guys, as always, if you have any questions, please let us know in the comments. We endeavor to answer every single one. If you like this video or got something useful out of it, pay us back by giving us a like. And if you haven't already subscribed, hit the subscribe button, because we pretty regularly, every couple of weeks, have videos like this coming out. I think up next, we're probably gonna do a gear up kit or a diff upgrade on our 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐤, and do a bit of a before and after. You guys ask questions about gear up kits all the time, so I feel like it's probably a great opportunity with our 𝐂𝐡𝐤. It's right at that point now where a gear up kit's gonna be perfect on that bike. So if you wanna see that, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on that video. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.